um, if the big demonstration in Egypt is supposed to happen here, you don't call people to come to this demonstration from everywhere. You tell people from here to gather in a group, and from here to gather in a group, and to go in groups. Because it's more difficult to be countered by the police. Things like this exist in Egypt. And there is a whole list of what to put on your head not to get a rock on it. So bottles, this and that, and you know. There are all the different lemon and onion and vinegar that you can use against the tear gas. They got a little bit prepared, so it lasted a little bit longer, but then came Morsi and took it away. So a little bit of preparation is necessary, but a lot of preparation is needed to defend yourself against this kind of hijacking. In Yemen, they had no preparation. They went out in the streets, started screaming, got a little bit beaten, a little bit killed, and then they camped. And the camping, I went to this camping. I spent quite some time in Sana'a looking at the camping, and there wasn't any ideas there. They were just sitting there expecting the government to give up. The government gave a little bit, you know, changed Mr. Saleh for Mr. Hadi, but nothing else.
Well, this is a very enlightening answer. I mean, in one way, I think that education is an answer for long term. The short term, what you're talking about is that people need to get organized. They need to get organized, and this is an interesting question. I have a colleague in the civil society movement. We have a huge movement called Bersi, which basically means clean, to push for electoral reform. And a colleague of mine in this movement, Hishamuddin Rais, who is a secular Muslim, lament that many civil society colleagues refuse to get too close to the politicians, to the party, worrying that this would compromise their independence and so on. And his concern is that if you don't go in now, you cannot stake any claim when transition is done. So you can be pushed aside easily. He's looking at the Arab Spring and say even those when the seculars were leading the case, they still get pushed aside. If you don't get yourself organized, then eventually the more organized one will. Yeah.
We already agree what we are going to answer, but I have a question. Can I have a show of hands here? Who is for free and fair elections in Malaysia? Okay, who is for it? Okay. What is the name of the organization that is for?
Bersi, which means
it's called Bersi. You know it, right? Who of you knows it? Hand up, please. Okay. Okay. There is only one gentleman here who has a yellow shirt. I don't see anybody with a yellow ribbon. Or maybe yes. I don't see anyone with yellow anything. How do I know that you are for free and fair elections? By your faces? You look exactly like the others for me. I would know it if you had something. And in Solidarity, we knew it because everybody was wearing. We had the biggest movement in the world, so probably there was no doubt that the whole nation is against the minority group of usurpating communists. But in a country which is divided, it would help me. I mean, I would like to take the taxi, which has a yellow ribbon, if I knew that some are for clean elections and some aren't for clean elections. And if the taxi driver had a little yellow ribbon from his mirror, then I would probably say, not this, I would take the gentleman with the yellow. And if I had now to go for coffee with one of you, I would go with this gentleman. And it doesn't take much courage to have a little yellow ribbon, and it doesn't mean that you want to vote for this party or that party. Because I didn't ask you for whom you want to vote. I just asked you whether you want free elections or not free elections. And Maybe I should ask who wants non-free election.
I think the taxi driver who puts on the solidarity will have his permit cancelled the next day.
Say it again?
I think the taxi driver who puts on the solidarity color will have his permit cancelled the next day.
Well, one can get cancelled, but if you have 10 million members and 10 million wearing it, there will be nobody to drive the dignitaries. And if you think that I'm a agent provocateur, I want to tell you that I did exactly the same in Zimbabwe and it worked. In Zimbabwe, when I arrived, people were showing a red card to Mugabe. Any of you watching football? You know what the red... So they were showing red card. And I asked people, why don't you have a red card? You could have it very easily. I'm sorry I didn't bring it with me, but I'll make you a drawing. It's turning into a circus. But in Poland, there was a time when you had a watch, and on the watch you would put here a little electronic element that is called resistance. Resistance. It's you don't know it because we now live in a world without resistors, but there used to be in old radios, there used to be those things. So you would put this here and close the handles, and you had it here. It doesn't take much courage to have a little piece of metal next to here, but you know, if I saw this on Włodek, I would probably be nicer to Włodek. And it was the same with solidarity, because the symbol of solidarity, you can see it on absolutely every poster. It's this very special writing of solidarity, right? So, unfortunately, I forgot it in the hotel. But we all had little solidarity signs here. So the secret police started to pull them out with the fabric and everything. So people started having little things, and instead of the solidarity, it was just this with red here, without any letters. But it also reminded the police of this, so they would also, even if nothing was written on it, they knew that this means this, and they didn't like the symbol. So if they don't like the symbol to such an extent, maybe it's a good weapon.
And what you're talking about is civil disobedience. It's actually very interesting.
Civil disobedience, please, honey. It's not disobedience.
No, it's a good thing. What I'm saying is that at one point when...
There's no disobedience in wearing yellow.
Well, at one point in Malaysia there was a case because that people get arrested for wearing yellow, for distributing national flags, for even organizing community clean-up program because there's a word clean. So they say you're supporting Brazil. But at that point, you find that half the population will shy away. Then you have the other half who say, I'm going to wear it until see whether you're going to arrest us. But what happened now, I think what you point out, the absence of yellow here, is that perhaps there's only one, except that for the gentleman. I think what happened is that perhaps too many of us get a bit too contented. We probably do not see this as like, a mission to be accomplished, that we need to push some more. I think we probably just get a bit too laid back. Because at the time, you go back to 2 years ago, there were people who would wear yellow regardless of what, because the state cracked down on you. When the state stopped cracking down on us, then we become much more laid back and say, okay, we don't have to do that anymore. So perhaps we have lost a bit of focus, forgetting that, transition has
if they disband the parliament, the focus will be back.
We know what color to do to wear now. Okay. Any questions that you want to
przestali być tak aktywni, bo przestali być karani za noszenie żółtego.
How do you get police on
How do you get the police on your side?
How do you get police and
Military.
military on your side?
Jak przekabacić policję na twoją stronę? Did you watch the film?
Yeah.
I actually watched the Jimmy Shop. I was not good. Jimmy Shop, how to start a revolution.
No, but you didn't watch this film because there is part of the film and part of the movement Odpor is the getting the police on your side by talking them over, etc. So there is part of this.
Powiedziałem tak, że nie da się oswoić policji.
You cannot get police on your side completely.
Dopóki nie ma masowego ruchu
until there is no mass movement
i przywódców.
and until there are no leaders.
Po to, żeby wygrać w polityce, muszą być przywódcy.
Because in order to win in politics, you have to have leaders.
A przywódca to jest osoba,
and the leader is a person,
która nawet jak się ludzie zawahają,
that even when the people will doubt,
to on tą legitymację będzie nosił.
He will carry the card.
Niezależnie czy to jest więzienie, czy to jest demonstracja uliczna.
It doesn't matter whether it's in the prison or whether it's in the street during a demonstration.
Lider to jest osoba, która wychodzi z więzienia.
A leader is a person who gets out of the prison.
Widzi strach w oczach ludzi.
Sees fear in the eyes of the people.
Buduje ich od nowa.
And starts to build them all over again.
I znowu trafia do więzienia.
And lands in jail once again.
I wtedy zaczyna się szacunek tych, którzy cię zamykają.
And then those who put you in jail start to respect you.
I wtedy trafiasz na komisariat.
And then you end up being in one police station.
I już cię nie biją.
And they wouldn't beat you anymore.
Mówią, o Jezu, który raz Pan tutaj jest.
And you say, oh God, you again.
I to jest pierwsza rzecz. Znaczy konsekwencja, nie okazywanie strachu.
So to be consequent and not to show fear.
Jak ludzie zobaczą, że lider może,
when the people see that the leader can,
to wtedy na demonstracji podchodzą do żołnierzy.
Then at the demonstration they come to the soldiers.
I wkładają im kwiaty do lufy.
And they would put flowers into their barrels.
Nie mówią fucking bandyten.
They don't use bad words.
Tylko ludzie ich poklepują i mówią, no przecież jesteś moim kolegą.
And people would say you are a friend of mine.
Obaj chcemy być wolni.
We both want to be free.
Chcemy żyć w przyjaźni.
We want to live in friendship.
I ci policjanci rzeczywiście są w dyskomforcie, bo to często ich koledzy z dzielnicy z tego samego miasta.
And the police is embarrassed because very often those are friends from the same neighborhood, from the same school.
To proces i konsekwencja.
So you have to be consequent.
Dlatego tak ważne w polityce są symbole i kolory.
So the colors and the symbols are so important in politics.
To buduje siłę.
Because it builds a force.
W Polsce każdego 13
in Poland every 13th of the month
młodzież i studenci przychodzili na czarno do szkół i uniwersytetów.
People would come dressed in black to the schools and university. The 13th is because on the 13th of December the military communist regime introduced the martial law in Poland after 16 months of solidarity, thus putting Mr. Frasyniuk back in jail.
Nie zrozumiałem, coś
Bo tłumaczę, co to jest 13.
Aha, okej. I przychodzili z opornikami, o którym mówiła Pania.
And they came with the resistance that I spoke about.
I jaki był efekt w jednym z liceum warszawskich?
And one of the ja opowiem o tych oświetników. And what was the result in one of the higher schools in
Córka generała Jaruzelskiego przychodziła każdego 13 na czarno.
The daughter of General Jaruzelski, who imposed the martial law, would come dressed in black also to the school. There is another very funny thing that nie masz tej torby, co? Bo na tej torbie to there are ways, you say you're laid back and you don't want to do it, but in Poland we created the civil society in ways that sometimes were not obvious. One of the examples that is my favorite is that After the martial law was imposed on the 13th of December of 1981, the only two newspapers that were appearing was the military newspaper and the Communist Party newspaper, nothing else. The phone calls were immediately put on loop, and when you pick up the phone, there was a nice lady's voice saying, "Your conversation is being listened to. Your conversation is being listened to." So the whole conversation, you had this lady telling you that they are listening. All the letters were coming stamped, etc. And in television, there were the speaker was wearing a uniform. So there were two different. The television started being the most hated of the media, and really to an extreme. One of the things that the television had a problem with was that honest people, members of Solidarity, and we were all members of Solidarity, didn't want to participate, so they refused that not only to come and act in anything like television, but also they refused that their old films be played on television. There was one, jak on się nazywał ten, co go tak wyklaskiwali?
Ten dziennikarz?
Nie, ten aktor, co go wyklaskiwali potem. It's a long time ago.
Ale to bez znaczenia.
It doesn't matter. Anyway, one actor was very eager to serve the communists and put a uniform and act, etc. And he was also in a theater. So one of the things we were doing was going to the theater and, you know, Shakespeare or something, and then he comes out, opened his mouth, and people would applaud so much that he would never be able to deliver the one line. And it was called to clap him out. And we would clap out anyone who was participating. My mother happened to be working in theater, so I know another story when the television directors came to an actress and said, "Well, listen, Madame Eichler, we in the television have a problem with our programs, and so, you know, we need your face to appear." And she said, "Comrade, I'm sorry, but I need my face too. I'm not participating in your television." But the one protest that was really the best was a little town called Świdnik. Nothing very special about it, except for they had the idea of showing to the authorities of their little town that they don't like the television. And the way of doing it was to ignore the television journal, which was at 7:30, 1930. So they would turn on the television, then they would take the receiver and put it with the screen out and go for the walk. At 1930, the whole of Świdnik was walking for half an hour with the dog, with the friends, whatever. And it was, "Thank you very much. I have a television, I have electricity, I know that it's the time of listening to the gospel, and I'm not listening, I prefer to walk my dog." And the town became famous. If you now ask people in Poland, what is Świdnik known for? It's not for the whatever they were producing. I think they produce helicopters, no? Świdniku. Yes. Yeah, but it's not for the helicopters. It's for their walks, for the idea of walks. And many people picked up on this, and just to show that if lies are coming, we don't want those lies. It's not a big act of courage to take your dog for a walk at 1930, but it was a very, very significant one. Anyway.
Well, any more questions? Senator Anu?
Thank you. I have this observation to make. Poland is already a nation state. At the time when it was fighting to regain its honor and its freedom from the communist regime. So that is already a given in the case of Poland. Identity is there. And Polish national consciousness is very deeply ingrained. In fact, Poland was a victim of foreign aggression. those who have studied the Second World War will know that Poland was divided between the Russians and the Germans. And when you tell me about reconciliation and truth, I sometimes wonder how the Poles can reconcile what the Russians did to them in the KP forest. But I suppose that's over and done with. When they look at their past and they look at how the Communist Party of Poland governed Poland, the linkages between Russian domination and the communist ideology that suppresses the Poles is all too clear. They have an enemy which is very, very clearly defined. But here in a country like Malaysia, when we are thinking in terms of changes, there are so many aspects to that change. Poland may have a single symbol which can be used to attack the regime. But here in this country, there are so many symbols. I mean, the opposition to the present setup is composed of 3 groups, each with its different ideology, each with its different symbols. And I think as much as we like to follow or to take some lessons from Polish example, it's going to be very difficult for us to do. So how do we go about learning from your experience?
I don't think that you can directly learn from our experience, and you know, we don't have national problems. So maybe it wasn't particularly useful, but maybe some ideas can be inspiration for something. We are definitely not experts, and even if we were experts in your reality, we are not living here, so we wouldn't be able. We are just telling you what and how it went and what was the force that led to something that really sounded impossible to carry out. I mean, you do not imagine the amount of totalitarian control that there was in Poland. It's not imaginable. I mean, at a certain point, you could not get a pair of black shoes unless you had a certificate of death in your family. And you couldn't get washing powder unless you had a certificate of birth so that you would get it to wash the diapers. In a country like this, in a country where my mother, being an artist in theater, had a certificate to buy this amount of white sheets of paper, nothing else, to create underground press is unbelievable that it happened. And at every single stage of creating what became civil society, the whole society had to work. If you think that this poster was just printed like this, you're wrong. The posters at the beginning, and I have them here, have been printed this. I have it, just because it's... This is a newspaper, right? And this, by the way, is Mr. Frasyniuk, the political prisoner #1. This is why I have this magazine with me. Ile było najwięcej? 30 000 tego informacji.
Tak, 30
000. There is no ink on the market. There is no paper on the market. All the conversations are listened to. All people who are moving from one town to another have to have a reason to go from one town to another. And there is no computers, no freedoms, no nothing. This newspaper has been printed every week in 30,000 copies and distributed. And every copy of this was read, according to our opinion polls, by 20 to 40 people. This is how we got organized. What you take of these organizations for the purposes of your preparation for free and fair elections, I don't know. I'm just saying that without internet and without Facebook, you can still do a lot of things. And to tell you the truth, some of those publications were in such a small print and so difficult to read that we didn't read them. But the fact of passing it on, if something happened to his family and I had the newspaper, I knew that the person who gives me the newspaper, if I give them money, this money will get to his family. And our Minister of Labor, Jacek Kuroń, famously said that when he went to prison, he knew that that's the time when his mother will have the best care, because otherwise he was very busy. But when he was in prison, there was immediately a whole team taking care of his family, so that people were not afraid of confronting the regime because they knew that others will take care of their families when something like this happened. I don't know what of this can be useful, but maybe it's just good entertainment.
On chyba za...
I may add so,
On
in
to inno zapytał.
1987, when the government launched its crackdown on this country, Operation Down, quite a number of us had to go on the ground, including myself. My family was also quite well taken care of by my organization. And that, in a way, shows that there is something.
This was in which year?
1987.
Here.
Here in the city, under
W 87 jak mnie prześladowali, to
we
moją
had
rodzinę.
a network, and I still think that it exists, though at the local level in Penang. But now that we are moving towards this momentum of change, it probably exists at a national level too. I'm not surprised. It may be there.
I can perhaps add on to two heartening examples of this. Just sometimes after Versailles II, a group of protesters were fined 2,000 each for protesting against ISA, a draconian law, Internal Security Act, that allowed for detention without trial.
Po jednym ze spotkań na Bersichu jedna osoba została, tam parę osób dostało kary za to, że protestowali przeciwko aktowi typu...
If they couldn't pay the fine in time, they would have to be due for a week.
Jakby nie mogli zapłacić za tej kary, to groziło im tydzień więzienia.
When the news was out, a group of my friends on Facebook immediately say, these were the people who did not go to demonstration in 2009.
Ale wtedy moi znajomi, chociaż nie chodzili na demonstracje, na Facebooku,
they immediately say, these protesters went to street for us. We cannot let them go to jail for us.
Oni powiedzieli, że ponieważ on protestował za nas, to nie można pozwolić, żeby poszedł do więzienia. No to to więzienie byłoby lepiej.
Between about 3 hours, they raised 20,000 ringgit, which is about $6,000.
$6,000 zebrali w krótkim czasie.
And a day later, the total amount was 26,000.
I 26,000 było następnego dnia.
Now, interestingly, all those were charged were all ethnic Malays, past members. And all those, most of the people who raised funds on the internet were Chinese. But this is that kind of solidarity that emerged now.
Zebrali pieniądze, a Malajowie byli ci, co ich wzięli do więzienia. To tutaj już od razu widać, że są różnice.
And what happened in between, to my analysis, was 2001. We had Basir rally. The state tried to stop us.
W 2001 była wielka demonstracja w Wersji, bo to jest jedyne, co
by arresting people.
I aresztowali ludzi.
And having ultra-right nationalist groups threatening violence on protesters.
Ultranacjonalistyczne grupy groziły im na demonstracjach.
But on that day,
ale tego dnia
50,000 people flooded the city center of Kuala Lumpur, our national capital.
W centrum Kuala Lumpur.
They defied the police violence, and when they ran away from tear gas and water cannons and so on, they helped each other. And a lot of time, you find that the person next to you is someone you do not know from a completely different cultural background and so on.
Bardzo często byli to bardzo daleko od siebie ludzie.
And on that point, I think many Malaysians realize we are not enemy to each other. There's only one enemy, a state that would actually beat you.
Zrozumieli, że nie są dla siebie nie wrogami, tylko że jedyny wróg jest państwo, które ich bije.
So in a very ironical way, the state united the people by being the bad guy. I have heard of personal testimony of at least 4 or 5 people, who say they gave out their plan of immigration after that rally. They say this is a country worth fighting for. I think that may give you a bit of comfort. Any more questions as we... okay. Yes, please be.
Actually, I was knew that in Poland and France, they stand for the liberty and solidarity. Is this right? That's what is happening that is saying about the gay, lesbian rights in LGBT rights that will stand for the sexuality and equality and gender. Even though in France, I would say the second is France, the number 15, the very last is Malaysia. Especially the Malaysia that's the worst and worst.
Your question, please?
About the LGBT rights. That is in Poland, France, and Malaysia. That's why in Malaysia recently I was listening. There's a sexuality murder have been stopped by the police. About in the year of 2011 by Mr. Pang Kim-taek, even though I was going through to the funds.
Yeah.
The accelerating of
right. I think our guests would not know the status of LGBT rights here. We can perhaps have discussion later. But if anything...
Then about the Muslim that you say that in Egypt, right? That's Egypt, how they are doing in the parts of it, right? That's by what they are doing the horse, right? That time that turning around, that's beating and slagging against each other. At last, it is how the progressive that we have to be maintained, especially in our Malaysia for the Arab Spring, especially like the North Africa in Egypt have been done all the ways. How it's that we progressive. Yeah.
I think I will answer one of your questions and give the chance of others.
Human rights, especially.
I understand. Maybe
the human rights in the Poland, especially working out.
That probably would require a special lecture. If you organize one, then maybe you can come. But any other last questions that before our guests wrap up? I think yes.
Can you touch on totalitarianism and authoritarianism? For non-political scientists or what, can you explain a bit more on the differences on that one?
I think that the scientific differences can be probably done very well on Google. My own experience is quite different. I have lived in countries that are authoritarian and that are totalitarian, and I think that it is much more difficult to protest in a totalitarian state because of what I was saying, the total control. If you have a think tank that can print something like this, then you can maybe play with the censorship and how far can we go and how far we can be giving instructions on politics, but you can. And if people are laid back, as Chinwat says, then maybe they will get the regime that is laid back as well. And if you want to mobilize the society, maybe a mobilized society will bring fresh blood. I don't know enough about Malaysia to be able to make any judgments. I know that in a way, totalitarian regimes, and we had a little bit of experience with some more left-leaning Malaysians that we met earlier on. Totalitarian regimes, especially of the left type, and I'm thinking about Cuba, Venezuela, and perhaps North Korea. I happen to know all three countries, and I was married to a Cuban, and I lived some time in Venezuela, and I visited North Korea. It's much more difficult to get the support around the world for such things because nowadays the populism of the left has taken quite a big step forward. It so happens that many of the totalitarian regimes, Iran, Venezuela, happen to have petrol at the same time. And it helps to be populist when you have petrol in your bathroom, I think. So in a way, the authoritarian regimes which I lived under, the overthrowing of authoritarian regimes is more popular. There was hardly anyone who thought that the Chilean regime or the Argentine militaries were the right regime. But there were a lot of people, including quite famous intellectuals, who believed in the Soviet Union for a long, long time. My husband was a supporter of Fidel Castro, and he told me that the big problem of him turning to be a dissident, which I paid by having to divorce him, but that's another story. I was jailed 4 times in Cuba for trying to visit him, and I have no more entry there, and he has no more exit, so we divorced. But anyway, it's very difficult to get people's support for overthrowing such a regime, whereas the other regimes are easier. There is still, people have dreams. People believe that what Marx and Engels were saying about the equality can be applied, and it probably can be applied. Just humans are not very good fabric onto which to apply their ideas. I don't know where it works, but I have not seen yet a system where it works. People, by their very nature, want to eat. And eat well, and there is no reason why they wouldn't be eating well in the name of some ideology. And what I saw of the regimes is of the totalitarian regimes of the left is not very promising. My husband, by the way, said that Cuba is the worst country in the world, and I tended to agree a little bit with him, but in order to make him understand that there are other bad regimes, I took him to Belarus, Lukashenko, quite a repressive regime. So we went there, and people had internet access, and the buses were working. And my husband said that if his friends back in Cuba knew this, the whole Cuba would come to Belarus.
Belarus is post-Soviet Union.
Yes.
It's very recent.
It's not very past. It's still Soviet Union over there, believe me. It was after the official disbanding, but it's still...
You gave some examples of what regimes. So a lot of comparison
we do that
comparing with against Singapore. How would you classify Singapore's political system?
I was in Singapore for 2 hours. I bought a camera and I got back on the plane, so I wouldn't.
We leave those more detailed discussions perhaps later. But anything else?
Lepszej, bo nie macie totalitarnego systemu i macie stosunkowo zamożne społeczeństwo, które ma mniejszą zdolność do ponoszenia ryzyka.
You're better off because you don't have totalitarianism and you have a rather wealthy society, although it has a lot to lose.
Trudniej, dlatego że macie, widać wyraźnie, ostre podziały
More difficult
narodowe.
Because you have national divisions.
I teraz powiedział tak, u nas też to wszystko było.
We also had some of it.
To nie jest takie proste.
It is not so easy.
Odzyskaliśmy wolność i zaczęły się podziały, które funkcjonowały jeszcze przed II wojną światową.
We reconquered freedom and suddenly the divisions that we had before the Second World War sprang up.
Moje nazwisko jest ukraińskie.
My family name is Ukrainian.
Nie jest to nacja kochana w Polsce.
It's not a nation that is loved in Poland. Well, come on, I love it.
Jednocześnie,
but at the same time,
byłem przywódcą
I was the leader
wielkiej polskiej rewolucji.
Of a big Polish revolution.
I teraz od polityków zależy, w jaki sposób się taki drobny fakt wykorzysta.
And it depends on the politicians how they use this little fact of his name being Ukrainian.
Kiedy na emigracji spotkali się wybitni intelektualiści,
when in the outside Poland famous intellectuals met
z różnych krajów postsowieckich,
from different post-Soviet countries,
i kiedy Ukraińcy mówili, no to jest straszny problem pojednanie ukraińsko-polskie,
when the Ukrainians said that the big problem of the Ukrainian-Polish reconciliation,
na co Barańczak, nasz poeta,
And our poet Barańczak said,
mówi, co ty opowiadasz, człowieku? We Wrocławiu najpopularniejszym człowiekiem jest Ukrainiec.
and Barańczak said, no, you're wrong. In Wrocław, the most popular person is Ukrainian.
To oznacza,
This means
że w każdym systemie,
that in every
w
system
którym nie ma demokracji,
where there's no democracy,
wszyscy mogą znaleźć
everybody can find
przestrzeń,
a space
która będzie dla nich wspólna.
which is common to them.
To nie jest problem Hindusów, Chińczyków, Malezyjczyków.
It's not a problem of Indians or Chinese, of Malays.
A czyli problemem zasadniczym jest brak aktywności lub brak poglądów.
The main problem may be the inertia or lack of opinions.
Jeśli nie ma demokratycznych wyborów,
If there is no democratic elections,
to moim zdaniem żółty kolor
so the yellow color
powinien być kolorem widocznym wszędzie,
should be a color that is seen everywhere.
a nie tylko na demonstracjach, bo demonstracja jest ostatecznością.
Not only at demonstrations. A demonstration, in my opinion, is a last resort.
Jeśli mamy korupcję,
If we have corruption,
to nie ma takiej możliwości, żeby nie zmobilizować wokół tego problemu zarówno młodych ludzi, studentów,
there is no way of not being able to organize around this young people, students,
jak i przedsiębiorców.
and entrepreneurs.
I to bez znaczenia, czy jest Chińczykiem, Hindusem, czy Malezyjczykiem.
And it doesn't matter what nationality he is,
Bo to jest koszt, który ponosi całe społeczeństwo.
because this is the cost that the whole society is bearing.
Otóż ja jestem przekonany, że trudniej w takiej sytuacji budować przywództwo.
I think that in such a situation it's more difficult to build leadership.
Słusznie, to bardzo dobry przykład, kiedy ludzie skrzyknęli się, żeby zapłacić grzywnę za tych, którzy demonstrowali.
It's a very good example of people who are chipping in to pay for the fines.
Ale
But
w Polsce, kiedy mnie sadzali na 3 miesiące,
when I was put for 3 months in Poland into jail,
nie wolno było płacić.
you couldn't pay.
Przywódca siedzi.
The leader goes to jail. This was the ethics.
Można pomóc człowiekowi, który sobie nie radzi.
You can help someone who cannot manage on his own.
Ale przywódca musi pokazać, że protestuje i się nie godzi.
But the leader has to protest and show that he wouldn't go.
I ja jestem przekonany,
And I am convinced
że taki think tank
that the think tank like this one
to powinno być miejsce, w którym uczymy się
should be a place where we
kreować
are learning
liderów.
How to create leaders.
W Polsce było łatwiej, bo sytuacja zmuszała tych młodych ludzi, jak ja miałem wtedy 26 lat,
I was 26 years old then. Young people like myself were forced by the situation
do olbrzymiej odpowiedzialności za słowo, za czyny.
to take a great responsibility for our actions and our words.
Ale przecież polityka w demokratycznym państwie
But politics in a democratic country
też polega na tym, by wychowywać następców, wychowywać
consists
liderów.
also in raising up the new generation of leaders.
Nie ma ruchu,
There is no movement.
nie ma partii,
There is no party
jak nie ma czytelnych przywódców.
if there are no clear leaders.
Przywódcy są ważni w
The
każdym
leaders are
systemie.
important in every system,
Przywódcy są ważni w każdej profesji.
in every profession.
Wszędzie muszą być liderzy, bo to oni zmieniają rzeczywistość.
You need the leaders because they change the reality.
Więc nie ma co, że tak powiem, obrażać się na rzeczywistość.
So you shouldn't get offended with the reality.
Trzeba rozmawiać i rozmawiać
You have to talk and talk and talk again
i szukać tego, co nas łączy.
and look for what unites us.
A ewentualnie spisać protokół różnic.
Or maybe make a protocol of disagreements.
Ale ważne jest,
But it is important
żeby wygrać wybory.
to win the elections.
Żeby był trwały system, który powoduje, że wybory są zawsze demokratyczne.
And there should be a system which will guarantee that the elections will be always free and fair.
Że instytucja, która organizuje wybory, jest poza partią, poza rządzącymi.
That the institution that is leading the elections, he means the Electoral Commission, be outside the governing party and outside the government.
Musi być instytucją zaufania publicznego.
It should be an institution that has public confidence.
Muszą być prawnicy, którzy tworzą Trybunał Konstytucyjny.
There should be lawyers who create the constitutional tribunal,
którzy poza politykami
who be in spite on the side of the politicians
rozsądzają, czy ustawodawstwo jest
will
zgodne z konstytucją i służy
declare
społeczeństwu, czy też nie.
whether the rules and regulations voted by the parliamentarians serve or not serve the society.
Musi być instytucja, która dba o siłę pieniądza.
There must be an institution that is checking on the force of the currency.
I ona musi być także instytucją zachowania
And that
publicznego poza
also must
politykami.
have the confidence of the people outside the politicians.
Więc szczerze powiedziawszy,
So frankly speaking,
wszyscy mówicie i w internecie czytamy, że to są przed wami najważniejsze wybory.
you all say, and we read it, that those are the most important elections that you have.
A jak słusznie powiedziała Ania, jest jeden w żółtym kolorze.
But there is only one person in yellow.
Paradoksalnie, szanowni państwo, jak czytamy, jakie ustępstwa robi rządzący, by się uwiarygodnić w tych wyborach,
when we read about what the ruling elite is doing in order to keep the power,
to reakcją powinna być presja lub jeszcze większa.
so the pressure should be do more, insisting on getting more.
Bo zasada jest taka, że jak dyktator
But because the rule is that the dictator,
wprowadza jakiekolwiek metody demokratyczne,
if they introduce any democratic rules,
to jest początek jego końca.
it's the beginning of his end.
Trzeba docisnąć i przyspieszyć.
He should be pressured on this, and something should be done.
Wiecie państwo, powiem taką anegdotę. Siedziałem w kryminale z zbrodniarzem hitlerowskim. Tak, Kochem. Tak. Tak.
I was in prison in a cell with a war criminal, Koch.
To jest zbrodniarz skazany na dożywocie za zbrodnię, za ludobójstwo.
He is sentenced to life for genocide.
Któregoś razu pobito mnie
And one day I have been beaten,
i przeniesiono mnie na oddział, gdzie siedział Koch.
and I was moved to the section of the prison where Koch was being held.
On był wtedy starszym panem, grubo powyżej 90 lat.
He was over 90 years old then.
Wyciągnął się na tej kracie
He got himself up on the bars of his cell,
i krzyczy do mnie: Frasyniuk, Frasyniuk, Solidarność kaput.
and he said, Frasyniuk, Frasyniuk, Solidarność is over.
2 tygodnie później na tym oddziale
And 2 weeks later at the same section of the prison,
jest kolejna awantura ze mną.
there is one more problem with me.
Wychodzę pobity na spacer
I go out after having been beaten for the prison walk,
i wtedy ten sam Koch
and the same Koch
mówi: Frasyniuk, komuna kaput, jak oni ci nie zabić.
and Koch screams to me, Frasyniuk, the communists are kaput, how did not kill you?
Mówię wam to po to, żeby powiedzieć, że jesteście na najlepszej w tej chwili drodze, żeby te wybory wygrać
You're probably in a good way to win this election.
i stać się gospodarzem we własnym kraju. Tylko trzeba w to uwierzyć.
And you may become host in your own country, but you have to believe in it.
I na żółto.
And
Wszystko na żółto.
yellow, please.
Well, it's wonderful to have our friends coming from afar to remind us of what the true color we should wear.
Miło, że nam mówisz, w jakim kolorze się mamy ubierać.
The Poles are very courageous people. Poland was partitioned 3 times in history, and they regained their independence 3 times. Now a free nation, and we Malaysians have missed the chance to end internal one-party internal authoritarianism in 1990, 1999, 2008. Maybe before Thai lucky.
Can I do another
Yes,
little
please.
poem?
Yeah.
Can you raise your hand if you believe that your vote will be secret? I don't mean free and fair. I mean, do you think that the way you voted will be known? Who thinks that your vote will be known?
Will not be secret.
It won't be secret. Okay, why do you believe your vote won't be secret? You put something in a slot, right?
Yes.
How do you think they will know how you voted?
No more,
Huh?
no more in
Wait,
practice.
what?
Serial number on the
Okay, serial number on the bulletin, and they will note, Okay, what is the obligation to get the bulletin by the serial number? If you come and there are 3 papers, are you obliged to take the serial number?
You're given. You're given.
And you can say, no, I don't want this, give me that. You can.
No.
Arguable.
We don't know. Most of the population doesn't know.
But I don't care whether they know who I vote for.
Say it again.
I don't care whether they know or not who I vote for.
You don't care whether they know?
Who I vote for.
It's not afraid.
I'm not afraid who I vote for, so I don't care whether they know.
So what if the government know who he voted for, he said? He doesn't care.
It doesn't matter.
Well, I was just wondering how many of you believe that the vote will be secret, because in many countries, such as, for instance, Nicaragua, when the big change from the Sandinistas to the opposition, UNO, the way that people voted depended on whether they believed that the vote will be secret or not. And, you know, if you think about all the mobile phones, sausages, beers, and whatever the people are paying you in order to vote their way, you can take 3 mobile phones, and still, if you believe that your vote is secret, you will vote the way you want it, even before you got the 3 mobile phones, even iPhones, right? So the whole purpose of buying votes makes sense only if the voters believe that their vote is not secret. And here we had 6 people who believed the vote is not secret, and all of you, I presume, base it on the bulletin number, right? Is anybody calling for people to vote out of sequence?
Yes, they are, but there are controversies whether that would be a better way, because we are introducing indelible ink and so on, so it may slow down. But that's a long question. Yeah.
Nie, bo ja się pytałam, bo oni mają te biuletyny numerowane, więc się pytałam, kto myśli, że tam 6 osób mówi, że oni myślą, że nie będzie tajne to głosowanie. Ale oni nawet dyskutują, bo nawet hasło pod tytułem głosujmy biorąc biuletyn bez tego, to nie jest najlepsze, bo oni zaczęli się dyskutować, czy to jest dobre, czy niedobre.
But only 6 of them who actually raise a hand who think that they're not secret. The rest of them actually believe it's secret.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, that the buying of the votes with mobile phones should be inefficient.
Yes.
But there is more protest, according to what we read in the independent media on the internet. There is more protest about the buying of the votes and the distributing of money and mobile phones and something than about the secrecy of the vote. But if the secrecy is guaranteed, then all those mobile phones will not change anything.
People sometimes feel obliged. That's happened in the rural area. But I think we have a very good discussions. Our guests remind us that future is more important than the past, and democracy gives us a second life. I would like to invite you to give a big hand to our guests who have worked hard to free their country and share the heartening experience with us. Thank you. So I'll pass the time back to...
Thank you everyone for the interesting question asked and no doubt beautifully answered. So for now, we'd like to invite Dr. Arifin Omar, beloved friends of the Penang Institute, to present tokens of appreciation to our distinguished guests.
Dostaniemy, więc nie plakować.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
We can perhaps take a As long as say, whatever is not present in the media does not exist.